The 70s. A great time for horror films and films with a horror edge. It was the decade of The Exorcist, Carrie, and Halloween, to name just a few. Bad Ronald, while obviously not a blockbuster on that level, is definitely cut from the same cloth. It was one of ABC's made-for-TV movies and originally aired October 23rd, 1974. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. It's far from the first creepy thing ABC aired on its Movie of the Week specials. 1970's How Awful About Alan, which stars Anthony Perkins, Psycho Norman Bates, is about a man with trauma-induced blindness who becomes convinced someone in his house is trying to kill him. Or how about 1971's A Taste of Evil, a psychological horror where an heiress recently released from a mental hospital realizes someone is deliberately trying to drive her back to insanity. Despite lower production values compared to films released for the theater, ABC Movies of the Week often had good writing and storylines, and also included a roster of talented actors who'd either already had illustrious careers, would later become stars, or were just solid talents regardless. The concept for Bad Ronald, in this case, comes from a book written by Hugo Award-winning author Jack Vance, who's probably best known for his works of science fiction. There are a few significant differences between the book and the movie, which I'll get into later, but the basic plotline and story beats are the same. In the film, the titular Ronald, played by Scott Jacoby, is a 17-year-old boy who just can't catch a break with his peers. They think he's weird. He's ugly. Can't you tell by the big red-rimmed glasses? They think his mother is old and weird too. Ronald is reserved and sensitive. But in spite of all the negativity, he seems to be a nice kid. He's polite to his mother and he's intelligent. She wants him to be a doctor in the future, even though he doesn't seem too enthused. He's creative by nature, likes to draw about a fantasy world. Maybe that's not such a good sign.
Wow, now I can illustrate my story.
But I don't want you occupying all your time with those extraordinary visions of fantasy.
But Trana's not fantasy. It's real. You'll see.
Anyway, Ronald, like most kids his age, has a crush on Lori, a more popular girl who thinks she's way out of his league. She isn't. I mean, just look at them. He tries to ask her out, but she and her friends just bully him, laugh at him, splash water on him, and since he's shy and non-confrontational, he just takes it with a faint smile. Remember this sequence for when we do book comparisons later. After this humiliation, he accidentally knocks over Lori's sister Carol, who's only 11 years old, but even she thinks he's a loser and calls him a weirdo to his face, and then insults his mom. Ronald tries to force an apology out of her, but she just slaps him. He throws her to the ground. She hits her head on a brick and dies instantly. Ronald is about as shocked as the audience might be over this. Surely connecting with a brick might stun you, but it shouldn't kill you, much less instantly kill you. But Carol is dead, and there's no turning back. When Ronald returns home, he admits to his mom that he killed Carol and that he buried her. Ronald's mom is appalled by that last part.
If it was an accident, why did you bury her? That's what the police will ask. Ronald, you've made a terrible mistake.
But she has a brilliant idea. Why not hide Ronald in the first-floor bathroom of the house, so that when the police comes, it's as if he just vanished off the planet. Once she's saved enough money, they'll just skip town and start life fresh somewhere else.
You must learn to be quiet. I must be the only one who knows you're here.
And the plan actually works. The cops keep coming around, but they can't find him. The nosy neighbor keeps peering in all the time, but she can't find him either. But Ronald's mother is not a well woman. Since his birthday in the beginning of the film, she's been complaining of pain, and she informs Ronald she must have a gallbladder operation and will be gone for a week in the hospital. Ronald is understandably less than thrilled about this because he's confined to the little locked restroom and has been relying on his mom for any outside contact.
Mother, I'm afraid.
There's nothing to be afraid of as long as you listen to me. Now close the door and don't open it until I return.
Eventually, he just gets tired of the lame condensed milk plus water concoctions and sneaks out for some ice cream, but ends up having to hide from the nosy neighbor's prying eyes. It's a tense 5 seconds, but he's fine. That is, until someone finally re-enters the house. But it's not his mom. It's someone selling the house. His mother is dead. Ronald is stunned by this, but there really isn't time to grieve. Before anyone else can move in, he gets his tools together and starts making small peepholes so he can see what's going on in the house without being observed himself. Who should move in but a couple with 3 girls? At least 2 of them are around Ronald's age. The eldest, Ellen, who starts dating Dwayne, the brother of the girl Ronald killed, and the middle daughter, Althea. But Ronald becomes infatuated with the youngest girl, Barbara or Babs, who honestly has such a baby face. I can't tell how old she's supposed to be, but she looks to be maybe 12 or 13. Remember this for later. I think it's a good example of how some book traits of Ronald's carry over to the movie, but seem more incidental in the movie because certain other traits were adapted out. Ronald basically stays in hiding and just watches the family go on about their lives from his little peepholes. When they're gone, he'll sneak out and eat their leftovers. On occasion, he'll leave shadow traces of his existence. Maybe the family notices a missing egg, or he's changed something in the girls' room, starting a fight among them because they know something's been moved, but none of them know who did it. The mother of the family even jokes that maybe they have a poltergeist. So one thing to make clear at this point, Ronald has gone completely mental while locked in isolation for so long. It already looks like he had a little trouble differentiating reality from fantasy before, with his childlike insistence that Otranto is real, but that was nothing compared to now. He's covered in his drawing materials, from his shirt to his bare skin, and has all kinds of delusions that Babs is Princess Fanzetta, destined to become Queen of Otranto, whatever that means. One day, when Ronald knows Babs will be home alone, he comes out of hiding and scares her all the way into the house next door. And before you wonder, isn't that where that nosy neighbor lives? Why didn't she see them? Well, Ronald literally killed her just with his menacing stare alone a few short scenes ago. Already anticipating that Babs would try to phone for help, Ronald disconnects the phone line from outside while he's chasing her from one house to the other. This alone makes him smarter on his feet than like 90% of other horror movie villains of the time. Not that he needs to be that smart, because Babs chooses the basement as her hiding spot like a true genius. A basement that locks from the outside. Ronald simply closes the door and locks her in, since she's clearly not going anywhere. Then he goes back to his hiding spot in his former family home, waiting for the others to get back to start a new set of attacks. Pretty soon, Babs' sisters and Dwayne are back from whatever fun they were having, and they find out that Babs is missing. Babs supposedly left a note saying she ran away, but her sisters aren't buying it and call the cops. And of course they're useless.
I get the feeling you're going to tell us there's nothing to worry about.
Well, you all agree she was upset about the diary.
I think someone forced her to write that note. And then they took her away.
I've chased maybe 200 girls who left home of their own free will.
Well, then why didn't she take any clothes or money?
It's no rhyme or reason. When are your parents returning?
Tomorrow night, they went up to the coast. They said they'd call and let us know when they're coming home.
Okay, just have them give me a call, will you?
Aren't you gonna...
I think that a good night's rest will settle everyone's mind.
The girls decide to go get some hamburgers, unknowingly leaving Dwayne alone in the house with crazy Ronald. Dwayne, engrossed in some sports on TV, never sees Ronald creep up on him from behind. Now it's weird that Ronald didn't kill Dwayne, but just tied him up, given that he's been showing a lot of rage towards him, or at least who he thinks Dwayne represents in his fantasy world. Is this just plot armor protecting Dwayne? Or is Ronald not really a cold-blooded killer after all? It is true that both his killings were more accidental than purposeful on his behalf. Or maybe he's just weird and plans on torturing Dwayne. Regardless, the girls hear Ronald beating up Dwayne down in the private lair, and they finally discover one of Ronald's peepholes. Horrified, they start screaming a storm as Ronald crashes out of hiding in front of them. Luckily, after Dwayne mysteriously disappeared too, the cops had finally started taking the girls more seriously, and they were ready to place Ronald under arrest not long after he left the lair. Dwayne gets untied, and Babs is returned safely to her loving older sisters. And I guess you can call that a happy ending. Now, Bad Ronald the movie is predominantly just a typical horror flick that hits most of the beats you'd expect it to, except that the concept is definitely delightfully unique. And Ronald is surely a character you can at least empathize with, even if you don't completely sympathize with. He doesn't come off as someone who is intentionally malicious before he loses his sanity. Before then, his biggest flaw is probably that he's overly passive, unable to assert himself effectively, and instead just lashing out in violence when he feels pushed too far. Ronald in the book, however, is another story. Like Ronald in the film, he is intelligent, a bit weird, and not very popular. However, I'd say that's really where the similarity ends. I mentioned to remember the scene at the pool with Laurel in the book, because I think it's one of the easiest ways to illustrate the difference between book and movie Ronald. While in the movie, Ronald takes the insults the other kids give him with nothing more than a polite smile. Here is how that scene plays out in the book. Jim splashed up some water, and Ronald jumped back in indignation. "Hey, I'm up here too." "It's just water," said Jim. "It'll evaporate in an hour or so. Some people even drink it," said Martin. Ronald forced an easy smile. "I don't object to water, but I'd just as soon it evaporated someplace else." Now, to cover more disturbing territory, the other thing I said to remember is how in the film, Ronald is infatuated with the youngest daughter, Babs, despite there being two other daughters who seem closer to his own age. It could be just a coincidence, but it could also be a carryover from Ronald's character in the book, who is a child molester. In the movie, Ronald accidentally kills Carol because she insulted his mother. In the book, Ronald molests Carol when he sees her on the bike and kills her because she threatens to tell on him. Ronald is also much more of a sadistic deviant in the book than he is in the film. In the movie, Ronald just locks Babs in the basement and only goes to the trouble of tying up Dwayne before he gets caught. In the book, Ronald takes Babs to his hiding lair and repeatedly assaults her before killing her. He then does the same with her sister, Althea, and would have done the same with the eldest sister, Ellen, if it weren't for the fact that she and Dwayne discover his lair first. Oh, and in the end of the book, Ronald's lair, and Ronald by extension, is set on fire, and he runs out and faces capture to avoid burning to death. On a lighter note, kind of how the original Psycho was an overweight, balding man in his 30s, but was played by the young, slim, and innocent-looking Anthony Perkins. The original Ronald was written to be a hefty lad who becomes completely disheveled, hair and beard, by the time he's caught. But of course in the film he's played by the svelte and charming Scott Jacoby, who retains a boyish hairless face to the bitter end. This is pretty typical TV land fare, of course, but if you've seen the film before you might have noticed it goes out of its way to show how Ronald likes eating things. Whether it's apples, chocolate bars, birthday cake, whatever. He even thinks it's worth risking it all to go get some ice cream when he's supposed to stay hidden when it's broad daylight. Most likely all of that is some carryover from the original character, who was chunky to begin with, and even managed to gain weight when he was supposed to be on a strict diet, locked up in the bathroom, doing push-ups every day. Well, that just about closes this video. Again, happy 50th anniversary to Bad Ronald. It's a fun made-for-TV movie with good performances, a quality cast, and an interesting storyline, not to mention a nice score and solid direction from Buzz Kulik. It definitely deserves some cult classic love, if it hasn't got it already.